You're a man that controls his own destiny. A man that is always in the pursuit of being better. You are in the right place. You are responsible. You are strong. You are a leader. You are a force for good. Gentlemen, you are the Alpha, and this is the Alpha Quorum.
Welcome back to another compelling episode of the Alpha Quorum Show. We're going to dig deep today into a topic that's often shrouded in stigma, and that has to do with sexual addiction. As men, we can't ignore the biological framework that shapes us. So a healthy adult male's testosterone level can be from in the 300 range to, say, 1100. Whereas a woman's testosterone is between like 15 and 70. So we're 10 or 20 times more interested, more driven for sexual experience. And that hormonal difference isn't just statistical. It's a powerful influence that drives some of our behavior, for better or worse. And with testosterone fueling our sexual urges, it's crucial to understand the impact and take some conscious control. Today's conversation is not just a wake-up call. It's an invitation to mastery over oneself, to dominate not just in the external world, but with your own complex psychological landscape. You guys, thank you for tuning in. Look, we don't have any sponsors or ads cluttering the experience here, so we're just here to bring you some quality content that can help you elevate your life. And the best way that you can support us is to continue sharing this message, like, subscribe, leave reviews on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and so forth. We're just trying to create an expansive network of influential, responsible men. And your participation is how we grow. My name is Brad Singletary, and I'm the founder of the Alpha Quorum. And today I'm hosting a conversation about sexual addiction and recovery. Patrick Carnes, an expert in the field, has said that addiction is a pathological relationship with a mood-altering experience. 40 million Americans regularly visit porn sites, 20% of which admit to using them even at work. So this isn't just about instant gratification. It's a complex cycle of disconnection, indulgence, shame, and suppression. What I like to refer to as the DIS model. So feeling disconnected leads to indulgent behavior, which induces shame, encouraging us to suppress or hide, thereby continuing the cycle of feeling disconnected. So our guest today has done some significant things in life. I'm going to let him introduce himself here in just a minute. But this is a struggle that he has been very public about, very vocal about. He's done some work in 12-step recovery programs and has had leadership roles there. So I just want to welcome to the Alpha Quorum Show, James.
Hello.
Welcome,
Brad.
sir.
Thank you, Brad.
So why don't you introduce yourself? We were talking a little bit before the show about just some of your life, what you've got going on. You're a family man, a businessman. Tell us who you are.
So I grew up in Springfield, Oregon, and kind of in the shadows of Autzen Stadium. So big Oregon Duck fan that's there. And then went to school there. And then when I graduated from high school, I didn't feel like going to college and just wanted to get out of town. So one of the things that I like to talk about, when I was 18, I worked forest fires for the summer. My best friend and I left, and I just wanted to get out of the country and go to, ended up going to Costa Rica. And so it was kind of funny. At first, I grew up surfing the Oregon coast, loved board sports. And so, we pondered the idea, maybe go to Mexico. This is before the internet. I mean, we ordered, just basically kind of going off of like Surfer Magazine and whatnot. So we thought about going to Mexico, and I brought that up to my parents, and they were like, oh, yeah, sure, And then we were looking at maybe going to some islands in the Central Pacific. And anyways, ended up going to Costa Rica. I bought a one-way ticket. I went with a board bag and a backpack, an English-Spanish dictionary, and a map that we had ordered out of Surfer Magazine. And kind of like, this is odd, but my brother's wife's mother's friend was living in San Jose, and so that was kind of like our contact. So they picked my friend and I up at the airport. We stayed in San Jose for 3 days, and then ended up catching a ride with them to the coast. And then we just either hitchhiked, rode a bus around for for me for about 2 months. And I kind of found myself. I was a closet hippie, and I just thought I wanted to get out of the United States. This was like maybe 1 year into the Gulf War in '92. And I just thought that getting out of the country would be a better place for me. And I thought, at the time, I just wanted to be a bum and surf. And I got to live my dream. And I actually would sleep on the beach in a surfboard bag, surf 3 times a day, and just just live that lifestyle. And as much as I thought that I wanted it, I ended up getting compelled to do something else. And so, anyways, I've always kind of been a little bit of a reluctant Christian, and sort of had this struggle a little bit with what I want to do and what God wants me to do. So anyways, I ended up coming home, getting a haircut, and I go on a mission to Tennessee, which kind of reshaped my life. Met my wife there. We didn't really have much contact until I got home, and then irony comes into my life again, where I go back to see a friend of mine get married in Salt Lake. I'm hanging out with a friend there that's got a girlfriend, and I didn't want to be a third wheel. So I reached out to Christy, my wife, and who I met in the MTC. And then ironically, she happened to have chicken pox when she was 23. So she could not go to school, could not work. We got to spend 5 days with each other. And I just knew there was something about her. And so anyways, we get married, and she graduated with a degree, and we came here to Las Vegas. I went to school at UNLV for a couple years, and decided when I was in school that I didn't really want to pursue a degree, because I thought that I could do better for myself. So I got into construction, worked for an awesome guy for about 20 years, helped grow a commercial construction company here. Kind of had sweat equity in it, and about 6 years ago he retired, divided up his company, and anyway, so I got the Nevada area. I've been in construction, running my own business now. It's not really a difference, because I was running his business that was here in the area, but I've got about 50 employees that's in there, and so I manage that. Love to travel, love to fish. So most of my recreation that I do is outside of Nevada, that's in there, and so have 4 kids, and that's it.
How old are your kids?
So my youngest is 17, and then I have she turns 18 here in 2 weeks. Then I have a 19-year-old, a 24-year-old, and a 25-year-old.
Wow. So I was once neighbors with James here. He actually lived in my same development here, and he's moved on to bigger and better places. But so I know some of his family members. His wife is actually a good friend of my wife, and I've gotten to know some of them through just being involved in the neighborhood and our church congregation. And one of the coolest things I ever experienced was James and his family were asked to speak one Sunday in our church meeting, and they got up and they started talking about addiction. And I was like, yes, we can finally, we're being honest here. And so I wanted to break into your experiences related to addiction and kind of what that looked like, how it evolved and became problematic for you.
Yeah, so my addiction is in the nature of masturbation. And so I, quite honestly, I never had an orgasm until my honeymoon night. And so I had that, and I was just like, blown away. It was better than what I thought that it was, and I thought it was going to be awesome. And so, anyways, at that point, like I was like, yeah, this is going to be awesome. And then marriage, and just like you mentioned on the promo, it appears I have a little bit more libido, a little bit more drive than my partner. And so, anyways, we lived in Happy Valley, Utah. As my wife finished up school, came to Las Vegas, got a little bit more exposure. And like I remember this very vividly, but we were living in an apartment, and we had cable. And as I would go through the channels, I would get this really blurry, like soft porn that would come on like after 11 o'clock at night.
The scrambled porn.
Scrambled porn that was on there, but it was just enough. And so anyways, that was what kind of intrigued me. And then, that led to masturbation. And I just thought, okay, like a good addict, how can I, cover this up? Like, this never happened. And then, after like the dust settles and I realize like, okay, that happened. I'm going to go back. And then that just kind of started to fuel. Across the street, there was this, this is back with Blockbuster Video, but this wasn't Blockbuster. This was just like a local video store. They had like a blanket that kind of covered like the adult section of VHS.
Classy place.
Classy place, man. And so anyways, we had our membership there, and we would get VHS, tape that was there. And then I would get home earlier from my wife, and I'd go over there and rent an adult section movie, hide it, return it, repeat, that was on there. And that was my source. And I was off to that. So I find that my addiction wasn't, and again, I'm not justifying what I've done, but I don't feel as necessarily like it was an addiction to pornography, because I never really found myself like really like watching pornography for hours on end. I mean, it was just a quick hit, just basically to speed up the process to that I was seeking to have an orgasm, a release that was in there, and then back to business.
So one curious thing is, you said you had never had an orgasm until your wedding night. How in the world does that happen? I mean, you're a studly surfer out here. You're going all over the world. You're doing all these things, and then.
Well, I would say maturity hit me late in life. So when I was a freshman in high school, I was 5 foot and 98 pounds.
Wow.
So, yeah. Just a little history. Brad has a son that's probably, when he was a freshman, was probably 6'2" and 200 pounds. So anyways, I just never was in the circuit of like, had much relationship with girls. I think I was hit into puberty late. I mean, I didn't really start like shaving until I was probably maybe 18 to 20 years old.
Wow.
So
okay.
I just don't think that necessarily like puberty hit me.
Your body hadn't caught up yet.
Yeah, I think it was that, but not necessarily really being in an experience where I would be like, had much relationship with girls when I was young. And so it didn't really necessarily fuel that, the curiosity that was there.
So you said it wasn't necessarily pornography. That wasn't necessarily the addiction. It was just to the release itself. What's so wrong about that? I mean, what was wrong about that for you? Because a lot of people out there say, "Hey, no big deal. You could call that self-care, and pornography isn't, anything serious. You're not really cheating on your wife and whatever." Why was that a problem?
So where it became a problem, and I didn't realize this until years later, but when I would look at pornography and I would masturbate, shame would come in and follow that, and then disappointment in myself and anger, and usually this window for me would be like after 3 p.m. because everybody would have left the office and I'd be there by myself. And so I would act out, and then I would come home And then I wanted everybody around me when I came home to be miserable like me. So I would walk into the house and kind of, I guess it would be unconsciously, then begin to just be an asshole. And so, like, looking back, I could see that that the disconnect that I would have with people, particularly with my wife and kids, because they would be my first contact with somebody after acting out, that I would struggle to connect. And then I feel like instead of wanting to connect sexually with my wife, because that took more effort,
more like emotional energy and all kinds of things.
Yeah, that was into it. We, at that time, young. We had 2 kids, relatively quickly, that was in there, and not really having like great skills to communicate, not being able to express what we wanted. I wouldn't say that the kids were difficult, but they were a difficult change, because the moment that our first child was born, I realized that I was second wheel in the house, and that really forever I would never get the attention that the first kid got, then the second kid got, then that made me third wheel. And so it was always like, hey, I want, that attention. And that even goes to today. My wife and I, we're planning a trip that we do for each one of our kids when they graduate. So we're going to Florida in February. And my wife said, hey, the arrangements are kind of set up so that we aren't going to sleep together on this trip. You're going to sleep together with Jake, our son, and I'm going to sleep with our oldest daughter and our grandson. And I'm like, we always sleep together, but it's, again, I'm in a different point today. But rewind 25 years ago, and I would just be like, I didn't know how to deal with that. I wouldn't process that very, very well. And so there's certain, benchmarks in my life that I look back where I wouldn't hold that back, and I would just like kind of rage. And, and I think that was because of a deliberate disconnect that I wanted to have with everybody else. And so that progressed to the point where my wife finally got the courage, and she and I were sitting at our dinner table, and she just looked at me and she just told me, you're a total asshole. My wife, it's not really like her to do that, but I never felt like I put my wife in a place where I would not allow her to be herself. And so anyways, when she said that, I've always respected her, and I was kind of at a more humble place in my life. And instead of defending myself, instead of telling her that I was wrong, I said, why do you think that? Tell me why you think that. And everything she said was the truth. And I was just like, you're right. But I didn't want to be an a-hole, And so it's really not my nature to be that. I think I'm a pretty, chill personality. Always look for fun. Always looking for laughter. I'm a glass half full person. And so I took that and I said, I'm going to respect what you say, and I'm going to do something about that. And so anyways, that's kind of when I started going I had been going to 12 steps, but not like participating. I would, it started where like I was so reluctant and I knew that my wife would be able to look at my phone and track sometimes to see like, if I was really going to group. So I'd go to 12-step and I would hide my phone behind like a trash enclosure or something like that so that it would look like I'm there. For the next hour and a half, I would leave, go act out, come back, get my phone and come home. And then I'd go back and say, oh man, it was a great meeting. and it's just so much BS that I look back at, my reluctance to try to actually like allow a higher being to actually like participate in my life. And I remember like I was so reluctant that I think I went to just a couple of meetings, and I went home and I told my wife I was cured. Like I'm all better. Like I only needed to go to like 2 meetings and I was fine. And then I wouldn't go, and then my wife was a little bit more keen to what was going on. I get caught again, and I would be like, okay, well, now back to group. And then I would be like, but this time I'm really going to go, which kind of models after too, like even personally, like when I was acting out, I mean, 1,000 times would I go in and say, I'm going to act out today, Brad, but this is the last time. Like
one last hurrah.
Yeah, just one for the boy. I mean, this is just one more time. Like this is it. So, like I'm going to throw away the lotion. I'm gonna like this is it. But after this time, and so 48 hours later, I would be right back, into it. And it was always because I was the one that was like, it was always going to be me that was going to like somehow or another muster up the energy to shake this addiction, not allowing any other participation, no sponsor, no leaning on a higher power, no getting on my knees, no thinking that the 12 steps really applied to me. And so, I like the people that were there. I like the people that were running the meetings that was in there. And as I sat into those meetings and over, I would hear these stories. And when I first walked in, let's be really clear here, I didn't belong there.
These guys are whacked out.
These guys are whacked
me.
out. These guys are scum. These guys are lower than me. These guys, they need help, but not me. And so, like, I would sit in that circle, and it was so strategic. Like, I would sit so I could watch the clock and just be like, okay, tick, 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 tick. I'm out of here. Then I would, it's like as soon as the closing prayer was said, I would just be up, and literally as somebody was saying amen, like that door was shut and my ass was walking out. Because I don't want to socialize with these people because I didn't belong with these people. And so anyways, as I sat there and just slowly began to digest what was going on and realizing that every time I heard one of these men in the circle share, it was me.
They were telling your story.
They're telling my story. They were, hey, this is, and I was like, yeah, that's me. That's me. And then, like, I felt like, too, I mean, I always wanted to, I never was really one to, like, I wanted to hold on to the secret of addiction. And then when I started to see, like, somebody would come into that circle and they would say, I got 7 days today that I'm clean. We would clap. And I would like, man, what would that be like to have 7 days? Because I'd sit in those meetings sometimes. I wouldn't have 7 hours, and I would just be like, man, what would that be like? What would the feeling be like? Because for 18 years, I never had a week, and so I just started to think more and more like, okay, they're applying these 12 steps. They're I looked at the fundamental things that most of them had in common that they were doing. And I thought, well, okay, I mean, this is on me because I've never tried. So let's try it. And then realizing that, like, I just had this moment where I actually had like a real connection with God. And I felt God's presence in my life, and I felt like, you know what, He knows me, and I felt like He had compassion on me, and I never felt that before, and that was the moment that I was like, okay, the door's starting to pry open, and I wanted to kind of peek inside And I was like, I like what I see. And so as I begin to, still somewhat reluctant, begin to apply these steps and do that and realize like, okay, it wasn't that much later that I came in and I said, no bullshit, I have an honest 7 days. This is a straight up, I honestly have 7 days. Like, and I think for some people they were like, 7 days wasn't really that big of an accomplishment. But mine was real 7 days, like a legitimate, I'm not lying, real 7 days. And so I began to kind of, really build on that and realize that the more honest I was about my addiction and the more transparent that I was about it, the easier it was to sort of like just have that like kind of bleed out of me. And I was so guarded as much as any addict ever was, as far as like, the walls that I built. And I mean like consciously like setting up these boundaries to hide what's going on, that was in there, almost to the point where like lying was a truth, that was in there, and not really seeing it any other way, that it was just like lying was my truth. And then realizing, as I kind of began to go through this, and then I noticed like personally, I think I started to be a little bit nicer to the company that I was around. And I began to see this like morphine where I would come in and I would still like maybe just have like anger, or I had a bad day and I didn't have any type of release at that time. And I just had to sort of just, like deal with it. And so if I ever like snapped, particularly at my wife, I would realize in the moment, hey, hit the brakes. You know what? This is not your problem. This is my problem. I'm sorry. And then getting to the point where I began to progress to the point where I would think about it and then consciously pivot and not do that. And then I feel like just as important as like sobriety is to me, it's also important that I'm not an asshole to people. And I consciously know that, and I know that it's because like I've made like personality changes. Like when I was in my addiction, I would like love Howard Stern, and I would like listen to him, and I would lots of like, potty talk, potty jokes, 30 movies that was in there that would just sort of do that. And as I begin to cut those things out of my life, I feel like the more authentic, real James right now is who you're looking at. And I'm happier with that person than I was with the person that was deep in addiction.
Earlier when you were talking about coming home and being an asshole to everybody, are you saying that was kind of almost like a way to push people away so that you could act out? Like, let me sabotage the peace in my relationships so that now is the fuel for me to keep using.
Yeah, I think sometimes I would go that way just because it justified what I was doing. Because then I'd be like, well, my wife doesn't want to have any type of intimacy with me, and therefore I would justify that and say, well, now I can go act out. And so, but I think also too that just after acting out, that you go from that high, in my case from an orgasm, and it would be like but it was a false orgasm. It wasn't an orgasm. It wasn't a connected. And so like my sex life now, where like I don't want a quickie, I want to have intimacy, I want to have physical connection, I want to be able to experience all that stuff, because that's, to me, is just is every bit as important as that end result that's in there. And so in the form of masturbating, that's all jaded, that's all clouded. I mean, I'm never going to walk into a gym locker room and there's going to be two girls that are like, well, okay, guess what? I just walked into the wrong room. Hey there, come on over here. Like, I mean, that never is going to happen. But like, that's pornography tells that story, gives that fantasy, that image of, to me, what isn't real. And like where I am today, I want reality. I want to touch things that are physical. I want to experience things. Like you mentioned, some of the stuff, my son and I have gotten into a little bit of mountain climbing. We climbed the Grand Teton together.
Wow.
We had to hire a guy because we had to be actually mountain climbing a certain action. We didn't have the gear for that, and we didn't know the route to take. And so we did that. Just last year, we were in Peru, and my wife and two of my daughters, we separated for 3 days, and we went into this area called the Salcates, and we got up to 15,400 feet, and we could just like see the Andes that was in there, and I stayed up there for almost an hour, and I've never been over 15,000 feet, and like I just couldn't soak it up enough because I had done something that was real. There's no fantasy that was in there, and it was difficult, the struggle to breathe, the everything that went on. And so, and like I mentioned earlier, like I picked up a few sports, like one of them in the last 3 years is kiteboarding. Kiteboarding. I love it because it is so hard. It's the hardest sport I have ever tried. I mean, you are the boat, you're the driver of the boat, and you're the wakeboarder all simultaneously, because you're using the kite to harness the wind. Then you're controlling that kite to basically be the motor. It is connected to your waist as you have a bar that you're controlling that, and then you're edging, to the ability that you actually can manipulate that kite to push you upwind, and going back and forth, and just the difficulty of that is what I love, because I'm feeling that failure, and yet I have a desire that I want to succeed at it. And so anyways, I look for things now that is a challenge in my life that I can put my energy towards, and not towards something that's not real.
Man, that's an important point. Some of our needs that we try to meet through things like, sex or substances or pornography or whatever, it's really just a need for stimulation. It's a need for reality. It's a need for like tangible experiences. And you've tapped into that in your recovery. You did that all before, even before you got married, you talked about doing that, but you have engaged in the physical world with these like sensory things that they're challenging, they're fun. You can do that with your family, and you've had all these experiences that have allowed you to like be alive and really actually have some cool experiences. Where before you're saying it was just this two-dimensional stuff on porn movies or whatever else, and that's pretty cool. I'm wondering, in terms of isolation, so something that I see with addicts, and as an addict myself, I know that one of the things that feeds addiction and is the result of indulgence is like just feeling disconnected, feeling isolated. It seemed like that wasn't necessarily the beginning for you, because you said just the experience, just the orgasm, just the chemical kind of explosion that happens. But what became of the feeling of isolation for you? How did your addiction isolate you more?
Well, I think that the isolation came from the fact that it was such a frowned upon, addiction. Like I look at it and say, my father, he started smoking when he was around 11 years old. He stopped smoking the day his first child was born, but he used to smoke Marlboros. Anytime he gets behind somebody, he hasn't smoked in over 40 years, maybe 50 years. He can tell you if that guy's smoking a Marlboro, because he claims, and most, I think, cigarette addicts do, that there's a flavor that comes with that cigarette. He can smell it, and and he can still recognize it even though that he hasn't smoked. And so I feel like where that goes is that wasn't uncommon for somebody to smoke. That wasn't, it's not like when you look at somebody that maybe is an alcoholic, but they're drinking. So my dad could recognize the smell of that particular smoke that was in there. But where I'm going with that thought is that at the time, going back, 70 years ago, it was cool to smoke. Smoking was on TV, smoking was advertising that was in there. And so I think that now smoking's not so cool. When you see somebody that smokes or anybody that smokes, there's a little bit of shame or disgust that goes through it. Likewise, like you look at marijuana. People smoking weed, even 10, 15 years ago, was like, oh, that guy's a total stoner. But now it's like, oh, smoking is cool, smoking's public, like that's going on. Less shame in that. But I don't think that there's that shame, or I still think that exists with pornography. I mean, nobody goes into a group or a party, somebody may say, I'm going to step out and go burn a joint. Oh, that's cool. But nobody says, hey, excuse me, I'm going to go into the bathroom and look at porn and whack off.
Rub one out.
Yeah, I'm just going to come in and just rub one out real quick. All right, man, I'll see you guys in a few minutes. And so I think that like that isolation came from is because I identified myself as somebody that had an addiction to something that was like gross, something that was like, bottom shelf, something that was like, like looked at like, is particularly too on the female side. Mm-hmm. I think that on the male side, people might look at that and go, oh man, but in reality, it's like, yeah, me too, So it would just come back to that the addiction was something that I thought, was shame. It's not like, two guys are passing around a joint or something like that. They're enjoying it together. It's not like, I've ever heard of like three guys going into one room and saying, okay, let's
do this.
Yeah. And so anyways, I feel that addiction just kind of came in and put me into a situation that it was like, I'm not talking to anybody about this. And I just felt too that, like I realize now that I think, I personally think that probably 90% of our youth are into pornography and masturbating, but it's just not something that even now is really talked about. And I find that even when I talk about it amongst parents or amongst youth, it is like, I get some strange looks. But I also look at it too and say, in the 12 steps, which is a huge part of my life, and into that 12th step, that it's a commitment that I've made to warn others and to say this is so big. And and my son has a great mantra, and that is that strict parents breed sneaky kids. And I feel like I agree with that. And so we are not strict parents, but we have very honest kids. We have all four of our kids can come to us and they can tell us character weaknesses. They can tell us their faults. They can tell us their F-ups. They can just they're very, very honest with us. And I would much rather have a kid that's honest with me and feel that I can be open with him than to come in and be a parent that just lays down the law and find out that my kids are extremely sneaky.
Is this something that you talk about with your kids?
Yeah. And so I've had the conversation with all of them. My older ones, I had it when they were there. And I just wanted to explain to them. My youngest daughter, I was not able to baptize her. And so we needed to have that conversation on why her cousin did that. And so it's not a secret in our household. It's not a secret with my immediate family, because I've had several conversations with my nephews, on the topic, that's there. And so it's just, again, there's something that I find liberating in my recovery when I can be honest about who I am. Because I've sat in so many circumstances where I sit there, and to be totally honest, I I feel like I'm judging people because I look at them and go, there is problems in your life, and you either know about them and you are skirting over it, or you're so naive that you are, reluctant to realize like that there are problems. And so like I look at church, and part of my frustration sometimes right now at churches is I feel like it needs to be more operated like an emergency room. Like people come in and like they have spiritual problems. They may have physical addiction problems. They may have financial problems. They got problems. Everybody's got problems. But like, what are we doing to talk about them? I don't need another lesson on tithing. I don't need another lesson on keeping the Sabbath day holy. I find myself now like I need brutal honesty, and I need people talking about like what are the problems, because it's like buyer beware. I want to know. Like I would love to hear somebody come in and say, my wife and I really started struggling when we hit 55 because our kids are now out of the house, and so parenting is no longer a priority, and it's us. And we find out that after we've been married together for 30 years, we don't really like each other, or we don't have any common interests. We don't have any hobbies or anything. And so this is what we did, as opposed to somebody else that's going into it. And, like, I don't know, it just seemed like I've heard more of divorces that are happening 30 years into it. And it's like, man, how can you be married for 30 years and then all of a sudden, you're getting a divorce? Well, there's also a lifestyle kind of change that happens there. But again, I understand that like church is maybe an area to talk about maybe certain spiritual things and covenants and more like early Christianity doctrine that's in there. But I also feel like too that like where some of the other churches I think are doing very well is because they're talking about like more reality,
like real talk about real life stuff.
Yeah, but I mean, I've said in a lot of meetings and just like all of a sudden I'll come in and like I don't know, 3 weeks ago I outed myself again in on our second hour of church, and I could tell some people were like, but it wasn't like it's something I'm talking about every week. I'm just saying, hey, you know what? This is my situation. This is what I got caught up into. This is what I've done to get out of the hole that I put myself in. This is where I am at today. And I'm a much better person because I have gone through this. Otherwise, I think I would just be like, just any other Joe sitting in the back row. But now I'm like, I'm more educated. I have more wisdom, and I'm thankful for that. And that wouldn't have come if I didn't have the experience that I had that goes into it. And I feel like there's so many topics that could be talked about, and it's not.
Man, I love what you're saying right now. This is exactly why I wanted you to come here. I've been wanting you to come here for like a year, by the way, but we just, working it out schedule-wise. But you talked about having an experience in one of the meetings where you kind of had this openness to God, or that you felt that thing. You've been, I guess you had attended church and, had some spirituality your whole life, right?
Well, I have had spirituality in my whole life, but, I did go like probably a long, at least a decade, where it was just, I was going to church because you take your kids to church, but I wasn't getting really anything out of it. I was disconnected from God. I was disconnected from really like any sort of like spiritual matters, that was in there because either reluctance to participate in anything, but just kind of like just doing my thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but I don't know. This is I feel like in a weird way that God favors me in a way that like it's kind of like a dog where. I'm not saying that God's a dog, but I'm just saying that like sometimes if you've been around a dog, you push that dog away and just say, get away from me. But that dog just comes back and just like head down.
I'm here.
Will you just give me like a little scratch? Will you just give me a little bit of attention? I haven't been around anybody for most of the day, and we'll look at you in a way that's just like, okay, come over here.
It's hard to turn away.
Yeah, and I just feel like there has been circumstances throughout my life that are undeniable that God is in my life. And I cannot deny those experiences. They happen again and again and again. And so, like, I was having this conversation with my son where I was like, I can't participate in some of the stuff that you're participating in because I've made, commitments and I got to stand by them. And unfortunately, and again, I go from wanting to be a bum living in Costa Rica to coming back home, getting a haircut, and a few months later, I'm on a mission. And it's because I couldn't deny that God exists. I just couldn't deny that. And the idea was I could run from it. I get into another country, get into another lifestyle, but it doesn't matter where I go. It doesn't matter what I do. It doesn't matter. God is in my life. He showed himself in my life, and I've been able to put myself in a position where I can recognize it. It's been strong enough, whether it's been, circumstances where, all hope has been lost, and God's like, just reach out to me and I'll fix this. And like specifically, like I was hunting with my father when I was, I think 16 years old. It's the end of the day. We get out of the truck. We're wearing light gear. It's cold, drizzling, in the Oregon Cascades. And anyways, we kind of go over a ridge. We see a deer. I take a shot. We chase after it. Long story short, within about 45 minutes, it's pitch dark and we can't find our way back to the truck. And so we're lost. We got no rain gear. And it's raining, it's cold, and anyways, so we get the idea that, okay, we're not going to make it back to our truck, we're not going to find that, so we're going to start kind of walking downhill and see what happens. And like craziest things, man, we say a prayer, 5 minutes later, we walk, we come into a clear cut. Our knowledge says if there's a clear cut, then there's a skid road where they get these logs out of there. We'll follow the clear cut on the perimeter, and we'll find that road. We find the road. We thank God. We say, okay, that's awesome, but we're not out of the woods yet. And so it is so dark, we couldn't see, so we're actually shuffling our feet on this gravel road so we don't come off of it. And anyways, like I'm getting into that second type of degree of hypothermia. I cannot stop shaking. I'm cold. And I'm like ready to quit, and I could start to tell that like I'm not thinking straight. My dad's coming in to that as well. We pray we need a miracle. We go down this road. There's a shot up station wagon, 1,000 holes in it, but not one hole in the roof. It's raining. We're cold. We crawl into it. We're holding each other, man, and shaking and just like thinking. Fucked. Like, we're screwed, man. It's like 2:00 in the morning, and we're thinking we've still got 4 or 5 hours to deal with this. And so, out of nowhere comes this vehicle driving down the road. 2:00 in the morning, Brad. These 3 young adults get out of the car. We get out of the car, and they're like, what the hell are you guys doing here? And we're like, we're lost. And so we ask them, man, hey, this is where we're at. They're kind of familiar with the area. And they're like, you guys are like 7 miles away from your truck. And we're like, yeah, man, I don't know how we got here. So they say, okay, well, between them and my dad, we know the roads. We make our way back to the truck. Before they drop us off, my dad asks them, how did you get there? And they said, man, the 3 of us were sitting at the bar, throwing a couple down. And the girl said, I don't know, I just got compelled, and I said to the guys, hey, we got to go for a drive. Let's get out of here. Let's go for a drive. They were like, nah. She said, no, man, I want to get out of here. Let's just go for a drive. So we just started going for a drive. And I'm telling you, Brad, there's no way in hell that anybody, where we were at from where they were, the amount of lefts and rights and ups and downs and the roads that they must have taken to get to that very point where we were, we needed a miracle. They show up. We get back to our truck. We end up getting back at like 4 o'clock in the morning. My mom's tripping, calling the state police. But the state police are like, well, where are they hunting? And she's like, in the Cascades somewhere. That's not enough, like not enough direction. We're not going to go out there tonight. We'll have to go and look in the morning. But I mean, like, I actually went back and I've seen that vehicle where I stayed for a few hours in that night. And I have contemplated about like how I got there and how I got out. It's just those little miracles that have happened in my life, that have happened several times in my life, that I just look at it and go, I can't deny that God's not real. Like, I hear the garbage about, the people that say that the dinosaurs existed, they didn't exist, that we came from a one-celled little something in the bottom of an ocean a million years ago, and we've progressed to this point, or we were deposited here by alien. I mean, whatever, like, somebody believes in. But I know that what I believe in, and it is, I can't deny what I know, And it's not something that's like, oh, well, maybe I didn't see what I saw. But when you see what you see, you feel what you feel, you taste what you taste, and you know what you know. Like, that's why I'm here. And there's some reluctancy to me because it's me. It's my own ego. It's my own, like, like when I feel like, oh, this is what I want to do. And then it just comes back and it's like, you know what? All right, God, what do you want me to do? And it just puts me in a spot where I just, I am often compelled to do something for others because I know what's been done for me. And
that's so powerful. I'm curious about you. You mentioned your 12-step work and that's a big part of your life. What was that whole thing like? You come in a little bit reluctant, hesitant, pretending that you were there when you weren't. It took some time for it to really get into your system. But I'm wondering what you found there. I mean, if you could kind of summarize for a guy maybe who's looking at, he may have an addiction and may need to do something about it, considering doing a 12-step program. What was your experience with that whole thing? What were the meaningful, parts of that for you?
Yeah, so I found hope there, because nobody's discussing my addiction. I'm not discussing my addiction. I just find myself slipping further and further into my addiction. And I'm sitting there and I'm hearing my story come out of the mouth of other brothers that I'm sitting in that circle with, and realizing that that there's hope so long as there's these fundamentals that most people have, and that is that they go to 12-step, they work the steps, and they get a sponsor. And I found that but realizing that I was disconnected from God, I was disconnecting from other people, and realizing that I wanted that value in my life. And so going to the 12-step and circling through the 12 steps plus the introduction, and hearing that again and again, and realizing that, you know what, this makes sense to me. Step number 1, do I have a problem? Yeah, this is a problem. How can I get help? I can put this burden on somebody else. That makes sense to me, because to me it's like, hey, I'm an addict. Do I want to own this, or can I pass this off and say, I'm a partner with my God? I'm going to take this, this burden that I have, this burden that I recognize, this burden that I know is weighing me down, this burden that has really kind of changed me and taken away and robbed me from who I am, as far as my personality, my ability to help somebody else, my ability to love somebody because I don't feel like I love myself. And going through that and saying, okay, now you get to that point and you recognize that God can help you. And then saying, okay, Now let's talk about what your problems are. Okay, I'm gonna go to my step 4, and I'm gonna make this list. My list was 54 pages. You know, it's a plus and a minus, but the plus is I have an incredibly good memory, an insanely good memory. I remember almost every face that I look at. I have a gift for a memory, and so 54 pages later, that memory is emptied and is put into that place. Then I sit down and I share that with the sponsor. I get the courage to go into. I just actually gave it to my ecclesiastical leader, my bishop, and I said, "Here you go. Let's meet in a week and we could talk about it." And anyways, he came back and he said, "Okay, that was part of the plan that was in there." And then from that point, I just felt like that was in my rearview mirror. I felt like the process was cleansing and I didn't own that anymore. And so then realizing that, okay, getting the preparation then to make amends, which is check your ego and recognize God is going to help mentor me through this. And then going in and saying, okay, let's talk about all the people that I've shed on. And then look at that, owning that, going through that process of trying to make amends, and then moving into the maintenance steps to the point where finally it's like, okay, this has done wonders for you. Now you got to share it. Now you got to be open, and now you got to try to recruit. And one thing that I had noticed in the time that I had gone to 12 steps is I probably have found maybe no less than 15 to 20 people that I find that those that come in for the first time, and then those you never see again. And it's boggled my mind because I've seen people that have come in that's like first time that's come in. And I know they've felt something. I know that they've recognized something. And I think that when they come in and say, man, this room is full of hope. This room is full of tears. This room is full of people that will show unconditional love towards me. And I just wonder sometimes if it's not too much, or if it's not they look at that and they're just yeah, I'm not ready for this. And they turn around and walk back out and embrace their addiction. And I don't judge that because I was there.
You did that too, yeah.
But I also look at it and think, man, I just wish that I could convey to them that if they would just stick with it, that it could change their life. And it doesn't matter whether it's eating, anger, porn, sex, smoking, drugs, that what it is. And I find, even too, that the fundamental of the 12 steps can be applied for so many different things, because I use it even in my work. I use it in my personal life. I don't just necessarily use it in my recovery. I have a number of employees, and I don't want to screw any of them. If I do something that's wrong, I recognize it immediately and I try to correct it. And so I find that where I feel that I have benefited from the 12 steps and what has helped me in my recovery is because the 12 steps are now fundamentally in the foundation of my life. It is in my DNA that is in there. I look at so many things and I recognize them and say, coming into this meeting, I had a conversation with my wife and I told her, I said, I'm not feeling connected to you right now. And so the last couple of days had led to that point. But I could look her in the eyes. I said, I'm not going to text you this. I'm just going to be honest with you and say, I don't feel connected to you. This is my problem. I own it. I'm going to fix it. I need to figure out what is going on in my life that is causing me right now to have a little bit of a desire to be disconnected with you.
Wow.
And so, but again, it's a situation where 10 years ago, James 1.0 would be I would leave and go act out and justify it and say, well, I can act out because we're disconnected, not knowing that we're disconnected, but I would say, oh, we're kind of in a little fight, that's in there. But now the progression is that I look at it and I say, this is early stages that's in here. But I'm owning this. We're disconnected because of me. This is a me issue that's in here. I'm allowing something, some sort of garbage to get in my way that is allowing this disconnection. And I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to find out what it is. I'm going to isolate it. I'm going to identify it. I'm going to get rid of it. And I'm going to connect with you. And so,
wow, such a stark contrast from before, where it was all about me and I'm going to do it my way, and you're realizing I'm responsible here. There's a disconnect in my relationship. I'm going to take ownership of it. I'm going to realize that I'm the one who's, screwing with the energy here, and I'm going to fix this and take out whatever's not.
Like your earlier question, there. What are some issues that come from addiction? What would have come from this is this would have been a total blow up. Then my wife's feelings would be hurt. And then she would just be like, oh my gosh, what did I do? What did I walk into? All of a sudden, like I just come out to the garage and say, hey, James, what are you doing? And I just snap at her. And I just come in and I just shame her. And I just get loud. And she's just like, what just happened? No idea that what just happened, except that she walks away and she's hurt. Now she wants to run from the situation because she has no idea what's going on with me that's in there. And so, like, again, I try to be the voice, the lighthouse, the light that says things can be different. And things are different today because that situation that I just described is so far removed from me, because I have these tools that I have developed that I have either borrowed or I have learned from other people and identified them and saying, hey, you know what? I'm not going down that road. And I know there's a lot of relationships that both spouses are in that come in, and it's just like, this type of unacceptable behavior is tolerated by one or by both that goes into it, and it just leads to just such a horrible relationship. And I'm able to look at it now and go back and just go, man, how can you guys function in this type of relationship? But also realizing I'm looking at my ghost from the past and looking at it going, to a certain aspect, that you're living with the old me. And man, that person was an asshole. He was, but I was also in a place where, like, I love my wife so much that I trust her judgment. And when she comes to me and says something that's like, imagine somebody that's just like got both hands and they've just wrapped around their addiction, and somebody comes in and tells them something that's critical. This doesn't go over very well very often, but she caught me on the right day at the right time in the right moment where I could say, okay, you know what, man, this addiction is miserable. And identifying that is what is the misery that's coming from it. And then saying, okay, man, it's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot for me to get to the point where I can say, okay, I got to start to isolate this and cut this out of my life. And the more I do that, and associated behavioral issues that I have developed with that, and even but prior to that, like one of my issues that I have this horrible relationship with my mom. And I found that too, like how important it is. Like I've studied how important a mother is to their child, how important it is that the mother shows that they love their child, that the mother goes to bat for their child, that the mother, comforts them when they need comfort that's in there. And then realizing I don't have a mom like that. And so, but realizing like, and I get this, like, I'm like living recovery. I got years worth of sobriety in my life. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to go talk to my mom, and I'm going to go say, hey mom, look, I've had this hole in my life that's been caused because you and I have this horrible relationship. And so I take a trip back to Oregon specifically for this, and I sit down and I have this conversation with my mom. It's one-sided, and she looks at me and she's just like, okay. And I'm thinking we're going to have this like great moment, and all of a sudden like things are going to be different. And now I'm going to be able to, have this connection with my mom. And, I didn't.
It played out the same as it always had.
It always has. But again, where I am, my preparation, my knowledge, my wisdom, and the stuff that I have now incorporated into my recovery, I came to the realization that my mother was only being the best mother that she knew how to be. And so I have accepted the fact that what my mother has given me, this relationship that I have, is her best. And that I shouldn't go in and judge and say, but is it enough? But how can she give more when she's giving what she has? I can't go to her and say, give me more when she doesn't have more to give. And so where she's at right now, she is giving me what the best that she can give. And I came to it that, again, this was not her problem. This was my problem. My problem is that I needed to accept that what she was giving me was enough. And so by realizing that, the change has come that I love my mother. Do I wish that she was more of a mother? Do I wish that I had more? Absolutely. But I also have come to the knowledge and the acceptance that she is the best that she can be. Likewise, I look at my children and think, do they wish that they had more of a father? Do they wish that their father was more this or more that? And then I have to take the responsibility and say, you know what? But I'm being the best dad that I know how to be. And so I'm not going to, I haven't written no PhD on fatherhood that's in there. I only have my life experiences that I have and the desire to be the best dad that I can be. And so the way that I approach that, the way that I handle situations, the way that I deal with the responsibility of being a father to 4 kids might be different than what you do, Brad. But I'm doing what I know best. And if I do what I know best and I try my best and I come up short, I accept that because I can't give more than what I have. I can't accept more than what somebody can give. And it's it's something that has taken me a long time to accept that that ideology, that truth that's in there, that it's not just about giving all, but it's also too about being in a room and realizing that, if somebody is giving everything that they can, accepting that and loving and appreciating, that's it.
Dude, you just seem like a guy you just have deep internal peace, and when I hear about what you've done, when I hear about the work that you've done, it makes me wonder about, the kind of time that you put in. You thought 2 meetings was going to do it.
Yeah.
You thought you were cured. But you're talking years and years of reading, giving, studying, going to meetings, talking, listening to other people, sponsoring, leading, chairing meetings, facilitating the groups and so forth. Like, if you had to put it together, all the work that you put into your recovery, how many hours?
Well, I think it's countless, but I also feel like too, you spend the time on what's most important. And so something that's, not that important it's easier to push that away. And so, I don't know. That's a difficult question to answer because, when somebody calls, when somebody needs help, when somebody reaches out, that's there. I mean, I can't imagine a circumstance that, you don't pick up that call, you don't go. But I also feel that like that motivation is there because maybe someday I'm going to need that help. And I hope that there's people that I could call and reach out to and say, hey, I'm not in a good place right now. I need help. And that they would come. And when you know somebody like that and you have that connection with somebody, I mean, it's awesome because, that I think there's a lot of people that are not in that situation.
Man, it's amazing the transformation that you've done. So this is years. You're saying you got years of sobriety. You start. When was the first time you went to a 12-step meeting?
I believe it was over 10 years ago.
Wow, over 10 years.
Yeah.
So if you're listening to this show and you're wondering about the process that it may look like for you, it's not going to be easy, and you're going to be spending a lot of time. There's going to be a lot of commitment, a lot of sacrifice, a lot of days you don't want to do it, a lot of days you don't want to attend and do the things that you need to do, but it pays off. Everyone that I've ever heard who's stuck with it more than just the 2 meetings has really gotten somewhere with it. So you've talked about being there for other people because you may need it. I'm guessing you already did. I mean, I guess you had to lean on the strength of others. You were calling, you're texting, you were reaching out to people, I guess, in the early days.
Yeah, but I found though too that like like one of my like mentors, I know he's been on the show a couple of times, is Jimmy Durbin. He when I first started going to meetings, he was actually the facilitator of the meeting that was in there, and there was this kind of old Harley guy that was there. Then there was another guy that was running the meetings, and I forget his name, but he was missing 2 legs, so he would come in with these like special carbon fiber leaf like legs that would come in, and I think sometimes I know it was difficult for him, and he would take them off. But those were the 2 missionaries, and then Jimmy was the facilitator at that time that was there. But just like sitting in and some of those early guys that were in there, they just made the difference where I could go in and just like listen. And that was really important to me. I mean, as this podcast probably demonstrates, I don't have a problem talking, but it just was important to me just to listen, because I really cue on those conversations and what like really works, for those, for individuals that went into there. But I mean, it's just too, I think it's the reality, the gravity of the fact of owning the situation that I got myself into, and then realizing that I could get myself out. But all the work that I put into being this like really top-notch addict, I mean, I had to put more work to get out of that. The work that I went into covering my steps, the work that I went into to remembering my lies, and then going, the opposite, where that saying is, if you tell the truth, you never have to remember what you say. But when you tell a lie, damn it, you got to remember.
There's a whole web of,
Yeah, you got to remember exactly when you said it, what you said it, how you said it, that went in there, so you can perpetuate it. And I just feel like that, I don't know, just but again, I feel this way in all the addicts that I've ever dealt with, talked to, that have allowed me to have any type of participation in their recovery. And that is that you in some sort of way, you have to want it. You have to want recovery more than you want your addiction. And it can be, that sometimes that pendulum can move just a little bit, but the weight of that balance that's on there has to weight towards I want recovery. And if you don't, and I've met a lot of people that don't, that's okay. But those individuals where the weight is a little bit more on their recovery, as on their addiction, and not their recovery, they don't get a lot of my attention. They don't get a lot of my energy. They don't get a lot of my, love and help, because I feel like those individuals are still in a spot where they're no matter what I say, no matter what I say, no matter what I do, what's onto it, the addiction is more important than the recovery. But when you see somebody that maybe hit the rock bottom, or somebody that's just like, I think I want this, then like I got a story for you.
Wow.
So
dude, I can't even believe I haven't known this. I haven't known you to this depth like we've talked about today, but I'm curious, what would you say to the guy who's just, he's his third marriage is failing. He just got caught. He's just realized that maybe this is compulsive and out of his control, and he's just trying to figure out like what to do. What would you say to a guy who's just really early on and he's, he's contemplating the fact that he might need to get some help, do something different? What would you say to a guy brand new at acknowledging this?
Yeah, I would say to him that there is hope. I mean, I think sometimes specific circumstances like that would diminish the process of that things can get better. And so I think oftentimes, because if you don't believe that things can get better, then what's the point of making any of those changes? But I feel like that the individual that we're describing there, that number one, he has to have a sliver of hope. And I feel like one thing that is again part of the foundation of my recovery is that I was in a place where I didn't have hope. I was in a place where I didn't want recovery. Like, I consciously did not want that. And so where this happened to me, I believe this can happen to anybody, that I see the recognition of God in my life, is one of my first real sincere prayers about recovery was, God, just give me the desire to want to get better. Give me the desire to want to quit. Because I felt like I wasn't even on step one. And so I thought, okay, this is going to be one of these circumstances where I'm going to say, you know what, is God real? Does God know me? Does he recognize me? Does he love me? Or have I gone too far? Have I done too much? Am I too sinful? Am I too dirty that he doesn't give a shit about me? And when I could go in and say, just give me the desire to try to want to quit. When that itch came, when that trigger came, and it was after 3:00, I'm sitting in my office, I did. I got a prompt that just said, leave. Just get up and leave. Because I wasn't acting out in my house, because my wife and kids are there. So I did. I just grabbed my stuff, got up, and left. And I just was like, okay, I didn't act out that day. And so I was like, okay. But I think sometimes it can be difficult when you talk to somebody that has a bunch of sobriety, or you look at them at a certain plateau. But one thing that is in common with a person that has 10 years of sobriety and one person that may have minimal amount of sobriety, and that is that at all of them at one point, at somewhere in their recovery, had one day. At some point when you're working your way. And so that guy that you're talking about is like, okay, don't ever look at where necessarily the road is going, but just one day. And so for me personally, if you ask me how many days of sobriety I have, I don't know, because it's not anything against those that calculate and keep that. But all I know is that, Brad, I'm clean today. I'm clean
all that matters is today, really, right?
Yeah. And so I always look at it, and I always have in my personal recovery, is just get through today. And that's my focus when it comes to my personal recovery and the way that I operate my recovery that goes into it. And that is just, and I would go to that individual and just say, let's just focus on today. If we can get through today, let's get through today. Then let's set up some dailies. Let's look at some meetings. Let's involve yourself into a circle. Let's get an introduction of people that have a similar background, have a similar resume that goes into it, that they can be positive influences on you. And then can you, here's one thing that I would ask you. Can you just be honest? Today, with me, can you just be honest? Because I don't want to hear that, oh yeah, I have no desire to act out. I mean, I got quite a bit of recovery, and there was an itch today that said, you know what, this could all be fixed if you just go and act out. But instead, I came here to this podcast. And so, but I just feel like, if that individual that we're talking about can just recognize and just look at that, hey, let's just talk about today and work through today. And then incrementally, as he comes in and builds that up, you're not going to just be completely healed and be better in 2 meetings. But every single day you can add things into your life that just bolsters your ability to be your true authentic self.
Man, I love that. You're talking about just kind of praying for the desire, asking for just a desire to be clean and sober. And then you started going to meetings, and the whole part in the beginning was just listening. And that's one of the things I found valuable about that kind of thing, is just to hear the language. You hear what other people are saying, and you'd never put those words, the combination of the words or the thoughts together. So you hear other people, some who have been further along in the process, and you start to learn you can make sense of your own life and your own problem by what other people are saying. The hope comes from them. You struggle with faith, you don't have a belief in a higher power, no problem. Get around some people that do, or that have some success in what it is that you're trying to do. And so you get the language, you're just listening, and you start to realize, this is me. I am a dirtbag like these guys. You initially didn't think you belonged, and then you realize, no, I've got all this distorted thinking and all these problems, all this ego, all this dishonesty. I've got all these things that are keeping me stuck. And just being around some other men who had worked through that was the inspiration for you. I want to wrap up here in just a few minutes, but I'm just curious what you would say is some of your just most alpha qualities. And when we use the term alpha, I don't like the idea of the alpha male, which you're definitely one of those too. But alpha we talk about is just like your highest and best self, the part of you, your gifts, your talents, when you're operating from your highest energy. What are your gifts that you can take ownership of and say, this is mine, and I'm proud of it?
So I would say that it is just like an incredible work ethic. And that came from, my father when I was young. And that is that I don't shy away from what's hard. And that's on there. The other thing too that I find, and this may come off as odd, but I remember listening to a previous podcast where Jimmy Durbin talked about that it was just enough, just good looking enough, just smart enough that's in there. And I find sometimes that I feel like I'm on the other side of that, where I feel like I'm not good looking enough, I'm not smart enough, and there lies the motivation where the vision that I have that every day that I'm not a good enough, like my company's not good enough. And then that flips the switch that I want to be better. I want to be the best company, the best commercial framing and drywall company in the Valley. And so in looking at it and saying, but I'm not good enough, or that if I don't do something enough, I'm not good looking enough, I'm not this. And so, but not looking at that as like, that's a fault, but that yet the desire comes that I want to be good enough, that I want to be better than enough. And so I guess that I don't necessarily rest on my laurels, but I always look at it and I just sort of like live my life that whatever I do, how I do it, that it's not enough. But yet also the idea that I want it to be enough, and therefore like that's my motivation. My motivation when I wake up tomorrow is that I'm not enough, but I will outwork somebody, or my will to be better, or my will to be enough is what I want, is what motivates me on a daily basis. And so I find that sometimes like I am enough, but yet I also kind of into this sort of like division amongst myself that like anyways, that's like my source of motivation that's on there. It's just kind of like twisted in my head where I look at it and just think, from when I was, younger, coming from a fairly poor family, like realizing that it was poor today, not then, but wearing clothes to school that were made by my mother. And like, just like, oh, if I could just have a pair of those 501 button fly jeans. But bro, they're like $25, in 1980. And, we couldn't afford them, man. So, and I just like, I look back at some of the pictures when I'm young and I'm like you see my brother of what he's wearing in his 5th grade picture. And then 4 years later, I'm wearing that same thing in the picture. And so, but it's just like, I don't know. I just, my mind tells me that like, no matter, it seems like whatever I accomplish, it is not enough. And therefore I have the motivation that I want to be enough. And I feel like at some point, maybe, in my life, that will change, but at least, that's that motivation. And so where I feel like, to answer your question on that alpha quality is that the reality is that I feel like no matter what situation that I'm in, and I mean this with all sincerity, and maybe your audience won't see this, but I feel like I can outwork anybody. You put me there and I can out hustle them, I outwork them, and my will to achieve, to be, is super, super strong. And I can't curtail that. I can't change that. And so I accept it, and I just go. And people that are close to me and know me and get around me, they know that, like, when I go into something and I'm passionate about it and I desire and I want it, it's like, easy, James, but like, I don't know. I still find myself being able to compartmentalize, and that the person I'm just describing is the work James. But just as much as you see that person that's got that type of energy and veracity is also the James that wants to play hard and wants to recreate hard and wants to laugh, that's in there. And so I feel like that energy, that aura that's around me, that makes me who my individuality that's in there. I feel like sometimes it's a matter of trying to steer that and to direct that, because if I allow that to get out of hand, it's problematic for me. But I feel like that also, though, is what separates me from others, is because I just feel I've had this inner will to just like really just whatever I'm focused,
get after it,
just get after it, and just like I just and just want it. But I think that want and that desire and that momentum and that comes into that, it just comes because there have been periods in my life where I haven't been enough, or the competition has been better than me, and I look at that and say, that's just motivation for me to just to be more, to be better. And so whether it's to be a better father, to be a better husband, to be a better mentor, to be a better business owner, to be a better sponsor for sponsees or whatnot. I mean, like, I think I told you earlier before it was off the record, I have no idea why I was coming here. I had no idea what we were going to talk about. But I know what you're involved in, and I know what the Alpha Quorum is about, and I just looked at it and said, I don't know what I can contribute towards your 100 and plus episode that others have not, but I just know that I'm going to bring something, and something's better than nothing. And I don't want to be I just don't want to be that person that like is nothing.
Dude, you are burning it up in here, man. We've lost 2 of our lights. My phone just overheated. Like, literally, you brought the heat here today. I appreciate you being here, man. You definitely are a light to this world. I don't know you that well, but what I hear you saying today is that you were lost, just like you were with your dad. And miracles came, and your faith, allowed you to keep hoping. People came, people showed up in your life. Maybe that was Christy. Maybe that was others. Maybe that were people in the 12-step program. But you got rescued, and then you became a rescuer, and you're out there and you've been working for people, and it just gives me goosebumps, man, to think about you're doing exactly what I believe that this life is really all about. You're doing it. You're right in the middle of it. And talking about work ethic, you've applied that also to your recovery. 54 pages of step 4, years of working with people, years of honesty and openness, and years of showing back up and being the rescuer to another person. Man, there's nothing better than that. You're a family man, you're a businessman. You said you were going to be hoping to retire here soon at 50 years old. And bro, I'm excited about what you shared today. And I just know this is going to be valuable. It's going to be out there forever. I hope you're good with that.
No problem.
So you guys, we're talking about this. This is our series on addiction and addiction recovery. If you don't have discipline, if you don't have a sense of responsibility, and you're not engaged with good things in your life, it's going to fall apart. Stick with it. Get some people around you that can help you level up and do the work necessary, because here's a guy who went from homemade clothes that were passed down generation after generation to he's got a company with 50 employees and he's going to be retiring soon. He has a lot of peace and enjoyment in his life. James, I just really appreciate you, brother.
Thank you, Brad.
You guys, until next time, no excuses. Alpha up. Yeah! Dude, you're coming back.
If you're a man that controls his own destiny, a man that is always in the pursuit of being better, you are in the right place. You are responsible. You are strong. You are a leader. You are a force for good. Gentlemen, you are the Alpha, and this is the Alpha Quorum.